Okay, so it's week 13, and today we're talking about version control. So what did we find out? Anybody have an idea what version control is in kind of plain everyday language? Max?
You kind of keep multiple copies, so you can have one that has less bugs but not as many features, and you try to work simultaneously on two versions so that you get more stuff done.
Okay, we can. Hey, anybody else? Austin, what can we add to that? Okay, anybody else find anything we should add to this about what version control is?
Any kind of practice that tracks and provide control over change to source code.
Okay, anything else we should add? Thanks, Suquinder, that's true. I'll put in one other note. It's also known as source control, meaning control over the source code. So there are some different version control systems out there. What's the world's most popular one? Anybody find an answer to this? No, that's popular, but not the most common. So this is an application that we're going to use today. So we're going to learn how to use Git today. So Git will allow us to automatically track versions of our code. So Git is free. It runs on any type of operating system, and we're going to be using it in a lot of our courses. We didn't used to include Git in our curriculum, and many of our employers who are hiring our students on co-op and our graduates said, you know, the students know a lot, but one thing you guys really need to teach them is how to use Git. Because in the workplace, most development companies will use it, and the students coming out of Georgian don't know how. So that's something you need to change. So we've changed that over the last year or two. So why do we use version control? We've kind of talked about it a little bit, but haven't really got at the heart of what it actually does, or what does it do for us?
Remember the history of your files?
Sorry?
A version control system remember the history of your file.
Okay. So, Suquinder, can you explain that a little bit more? What does that mean? You're right. Why do we care? So what's the benefit of remembering the history of a file?
If we make a mistake that wrecks the program,
Yep.
we can always go back to previous versions of the file.
This is one of the biggest reasons why we do this, right? If we're building out applications, and it doesn't matter what kind of code we're writing, it doesn't matter if we're writing a desktop application like the C# ones we're doing, or we're doing a PHP website, or even a website that's just plain HTML and CSS with no actual coding or programming in it at all, right? These things, we don't build them in a couple of hours. It takes time to build them and get them ready. And eventually there's a chance that we'll get something working, and then we'll go and we'll do something else later on, and then we're going to break something that we had working earlier. So without version control, we're now going to have to scramble and do a lot of work to go back and try and get that feature working again that we've now broken. So the idea of version control is that a tool like Git, it creates an archive of all of our earlier versions. So we can always go back to a previous version of our code. Has anybody ever worked in Microsoft Word? If you've ever written an essay or work with someone else, you may have noticed Word has this feature. In fact, Microsoft Word has a kind of version control tool right in it. Has anybody ever worked with that feature or know what it's called? Where it will show you what modifications you've made to a Word document? No one's ever seen this before? Well, I should probably show. Yeah, how do we get to it? So if I open up a document here.
I don't remember how to do it on this one, but on the old one, I would just click File.
Okay, so I'll save this. Just save it here as document 1. So let's say I'm going to work on this over a period of time, or I'm going to work on it with someone else. Maybe Yuta and I are going to share this document and we want to be able to see each other's changes. Actually, hang on, let me do this first. Word has version control built in, which is right here. Under review, if I turn on track changes, so let's say I make this, now I'll start changing my document. I'll make this bold. I save the document. By turning on track changes, it basically is doing version control, right? It shows me the changes, and I actually have the ability to undo them. It says what user it is, when, and tries to describe those changes. So if I work on something and Yuta takes it out and I want to put it back in, that file, those changes aren't gone, right? There's an archive being created here. So I could, for example, so if Yuta doesn't like what I say, he can say, I'm going to reject that change, right? I'm going to take it out. And it goes out. So Word actually has this feature if you're working on a document, particularly if you're working on it and sharing it with someone else. So our version control is very similar to this. It allows us to see all of the changes. So that's the main reason to use version control. Can you think of any other reasons why we would use it?
You could always have a newer version of something that's not released that you're working on, and you just be using it to like have the current like an older version being used.
That's a great reason and a very common one. So we build a website, we build an application, and we put that site live. We put it on the internet and people are using it. Well, over time, we may have to make changes or updates. We don't want to be updating and working on the live version because it may take us time and there may be bugs as we're working on it. We want to test and work on those bugs. So we can create a development version and work on this version over here until it's ready while our current production version is online and available. So that is another reason for doing it. What about if we're working on a team? So let's say you guys are working together on an application, Jesse, Sukhwinder, and Raj. How would having this version control software like Git, how would that help you? What would it allow you to do? Okay, so that's one way of making sure, exactly, you can share files, and it's a way of making sure not only we're not overwriting each other's changes, but the version control, let's say Jesse and Raj, you're working on the same file. Right? Like Jesse, you're working on the CSS, Raj, you're adding some code to it, some JavaScript code, but you need to work in the same page. Okay? The version control will actually show you who made what changes. So we can see those changes that other people we're working with made. And then we can accept, reject, or we can merge them together. Okay? So it's also a really good tool for collaboration because many projects are way too big for just one programmer, one developer, one designer. Right? Sarah, you just started working, right? you're doing design work. How many people are on the team? Right. So the chances that you're going to do a project all on your own is really small. And in fact, if they're not using, I believe they're using Git and GitHub for managing all the code on their websites, right? So you're going to be using this at work. So these reasons, and also share and merge changes. So for all these reasons, I'll just save those notes. These are the reasons that all designers, all developers need to know how to use a version control system. Yes, that should be other. Thank you. So in fact, in most of my other classes, when students submit their assignments, I don't actually have them upload them to Blackboard. What I have them do is upload them to a version control system using Git. And all they have to do is give me the link. And there's a website that allows you to store your code archive. So it looks something like this. And even when I do my files in class and all my other courses, I don't put them on Blackboard. I put them on, does anybody know what the main website is that holds most people's Git code archives? You got it.
I'm just guessing.
You're right.
Recent pages.
Right? So for example, here are all of my students in my other classes. Many of their assignments are due this week. So these are all their assignments. And these show me that they're private. So only they can access them and I can access them. But I can also make public repositories. So if I go to my own GitHub page, when we're working in class, so for example, here's my Wednesday. So notice here, so here was my lesson from last Wednesday in COMP1030, which is Advanced Web Programming. It's a JavaScript course. So what I did partway through class when we took a break, few students said, I'm a little bit behind. Can I have your code up to this point in the class so far? So all I did was I created a new, which are called repositories. Each project is called a repository. And notice here it says 3 commits. Each commit is a different version. So I can go into the version history. So here were the files at the end of part 1 of class. So I uploaded that version so anybody in class who didn't have theirs working, they could download and take a copy of it. So if I want to see my code at this part in the class, I can just browse online, and here we were just doing HTML and JavaScript. So any student could go with this link and just download a copy, and then they have everything. And then at the end of class, here was my end of class. And each time I put in a message describing that version of what changes I made. So that way, if I'm working on a project and I break something, I can go back and I get these descriptions of all my different versions. So I can go and retrieve an earlier version. And this tool will even show me things like, so here it shows me what files were changed and what code was changed. So for example, here's a simple HTML. So in the previous version, I just had this, and I added in, the green indicates these were additions. So if I'm working with somebody else, again, coming back to my example of Raj and Jesse working, you guys could see each other's changes, which is great if something goes wrong or something breaks. And the tool tracks all this stuff automatically for us. So you can probably see why this is a huge benefit to us. So the next thing we need to do is we need to get set up. We need to install a few tools on our computer. So the first thing we're going to need to install is the actual Git program itself, which allows us to create archives of any file or any folder on our computer. We'll then install the GitHub client and create a GitHub account. And there's many different ways that we can put our code on GitHub. And we're going to try, there's actually 3 different methods. We're going to try all of them. They're all simple and you can use any one of them. One of them is just using your command line where we just type the commands. There's a little GitHub program that we can just click on things. That program's free, so we'll download it and we'll install that. And we can actually even, GitHub's actually integrated right into Visual Studio with this little window called the Team Explorer. And in here, Visual Studio, if we install Git, it actually will track all the files that you change. And you can create new versions and copy them to the GitHub website right through Visual Studio. So we'll do all 3 of these methods and you can use any one of them. So GitHub itself, so the actual program is called Git that allows us to track our versions. And GitHub is basically a free cloud service that will allow you to store an unlimited amount of code. So for example, I have on GitHub, how many projects? So there's no limit. I have 144 of my projects because every week in class, I create a new project in every single class and put all my files up here for the students. So they're all on GitHub. So there's no limit to how big those projects can be, and there's no limit to how many repositories I can create. And I can choose if I want my repositories to be public, where anybody can see them, or private. So a couple of the other reasons that we need to get familiar with GitHub. Number one, this is the main place whenever programmers develop any kind of open source library and they make it available for other developers to use, GitHub is where they put it. So, hey, I found a really neat JavaScript library that I want to use on my site. Where do I get the code? The developer is going to put it on GitHub for you to download. The other reason that we want you to become comfortable with it is many of our co-op and graduate employers say this is one of the things they look at when they get job applications, is they want to see 3 things from students. The 3 things they check right away. The first thing is your LinkedIn page. And you guys have your co-op class with Rita right now, don't you? This semester. Have you talked about LinkedIn at all? So LinkedIn is basically like your professional Facebook page for business. So you all should have a profile that describes you and some of your experience and skills. The second thing is a portfolio, a website that shows some of your work and what you can do. And the third thing they want to see is your GitHub page where they can actually look at some of your code and see what kinds of things you build and what your code looks like. Many employers have said those are the 3 things they look at, and if someone doesn't have those things, they're not even going to really look at you. We've heard that repeatedly from employers. So within the next hour, everyone's going to have their own GitHub page. So the first thing we need to do is actually install the Git client on your machines, and then we'll install and configure GitHub. So I'll just throw the link up here on Blackboard. Let's see, we've got a couple links here. So bear with me for a second. Okay, if you just refresh your week 13 folder, so first we're going to install Git on our machines. So go to git-scm.com. All of this is free. You don't need to pay for any of it. I know in this class, if you're a Mac user, you have Windows installed, so you're going to want to install this on your install the Windows version. But I would also be installing it on your Mac OS because you'll need it for your other classes next semester. So once you get to the main Git page, it should recognize your operating system. So you can just click this downloads for Windows or this download link. So it'll just save this little executable. So save it and run the install. It just doesn't take very long. If your download doesn't start, you can download it manually, and probably you want the 64-bit version. I doubt anyone's running a 32-bit version of Windows anymore.
You install everything, or just what's automatically checked?
You can just accept all the default options. You shouldn't need to change anything in the installation. So once this is installed, we can start tracking. Git will be able to track versions of any folder on your computer that you want it to. It's also great if we actually delete a file. We can go and pull an earlier version, and then we have that file back. Has anybody's actually finished installing, or it's still running?
It's still installing from I created a Git profile while I was waiting.
Okay. Maybe when yours finishes, just let me know that it's done. I won't move on until we've got Git installed. I haven't done it for a little while, so I can't remember exactly how long it takes.
For me, it's like about halfway.
Okay.
I tried making a GitHub account like probably halfway through the semester just because I wanted to see what it was. And if I remember correctly, there was something about you need to pay to have a private repository.
Normally, yes. So normally on GitHub, you can create as many public repositories as you want for free. If you want to make a repository private, they charge you $7 a month. However, they also have a student program, and I'm going to show you how to sign up for the student program. And students get unlimited private repositories for no charge. So when we're doing our classwork, it's okay to push your code publicly, who cares? But when you're doing your assignments, you want that code to be private so other students don't have access to your code.
Seems like students get the best kids.
Well, it wouldn't work if they had public repositories for students. Think about how easy cheating.
Well, the idea is many of the software companies, I mean, that's why we get Visual Studio for free, right? They want students, they figure if you learn how to use their software as a student, that once you're out working, you'll be inclined to use it and maybe pay for it.
That is Visual Studio's like $8,000 a month. It looked like that.
It's not $8,000 a month, but there are many different versions of it. The actual enterprise version of Visual Studio, I don't know how much it is.
Plus something was $8,000 a month. How did that money just spent?
Well, it's usually not individuals buying it, and usually they buy licenses in large quantities, companies. So
Yeah, maybe that's like a little bit one we use in May. Like,
Here, it's anywhere from 2,500 US to 6,000 US. It's the enterprise version.
not a cheap program.
No, but you get it available free as a student for non-commercial use, for learning purposes.
Can they tell somehow if you're using it commercially? Or do they need your computer for that?
I don't know the answer to that.
I know, for like AutoCAD, if you try to print it off like a printer, not a school.
Still downloading, or is it done?
Oh, mine finished, just finished. It will print a thing in AutoCAD.
Oh,
If you use a student version, it will actually print like a thing that says student version on your things. They don't print it at the school.
oh,
I don't know why it worked at the school, but
yeah. That's interesting how that works.
and, I guess you could use it,
So I've put these slides are up on Blackboard in the lesson 13 folder. I mean, I'm not going to read them to you. They basically talk about many of the things we've already talked about. So version control, a couple of additional notes, is basically it tracks the numbers of each version, and each version is automatically time-stamped by Git as well. Okay? So then we can compare, we can restore, we can merge versions of a program together. So this was originally, so Git's been around since 2005. And originally it was sort of a Linux-based system, but it will run now on OS X. It runs on Windows as well. So GitHub is this cloud service that allows us to work and kind of store our, not just local copies of our archives, but lets us store them online in the cloud, either publicly if we want to share them, or privately if we want to do that. Just to show you an example of how students have used it in the past. I'll have to find the link here. Hang on. Let me go back. So the next thing I want you to do, just as I search for this, is I'm not sure why it's not showing up. All right, I'll come back to that. So open a tab to github.com. So that's the second link I put on Blackboard. So let's go to GitHub. So signing up is as simple as creating a username and putting in your email address. Now, we're basically, here's what I suggest you do. Use a personal email for your account, and then we're going to create a second account that's a student account, and then we're going to link them together. And the benefit of creating a student account is you get the private repositories for free. You also get some extra goodies with creating a GitHub student account that I'll show you in a minute. So create an account here. And the reason I suggest you don't use your student email is because there's a good chance you're going to want to keep using GitHub long after you're gone from Georgia. And your student email won't be good forever. So create it with a personal email address first, and then we'll add the student part in a minute. So go ahead and sign up for your free GitHub account using a personal email address that you own. It will probably send you a verification email to your email address, which you'll need to go and click on in order to make your account active.
actually you didn't.
No, doesn't? Just does it right away? Okay. I am just going to look for going to stop my screen share for just a second. So make sure your GitHub account is all set up. Yeah, it's too bad I can't find the link I was looking for. Okay, so you should have a GitHub account set up now. Now I'm going to show you how to get the GitHub student pack and then how to link your accounts together.
Why would you have to link your accounts? After you create your account, you can go to the profiles and then there's emails and you can add a second email.
I know, but you also need to register for the student pack. Just because you add, that's part of it, but that doesn't, they don't know that you're a student just based on your email.
No, I'm just saying that linking the two accounts.
So go here. Yes, that's basically what we're going to do. So now go to education.github.com. It'll take you here. And if you click on the Get the Student Developer Pack, click Get the Pack. So here are the things that come along with the Student Development Pack. Well, this is free. Atom is has anybody used the Atom program before? Okay, so Atom is a text editor. You're probably using it maybe in Scott's class. I think Scott uses it. So Atom is an HTML editor and text editor that was created by the makers of GitHub. It's fairly new. You actually get some resources on Amazon Web Services. If you want to try their cloud hosting service, they give you some credits. Several other cloud hosts. Here you get some credits. We get Namecheap. So this gives you 1 year of a domain name. So if you want to register your name, .ca or .com, you get it free for a year with Namecheap, as well as a free SSL certificate for a year. So you get access to a bunch of these services, like Unreal Engine, which is for game development. So you get access to this with your GitHub student pack. So if you click Get Your Pack and you log in, what you then need to do, Max, now we need to do the part you were talking about. You need to go into your account settings. So if you just go to your main GitHub page, if you click on your name here and click your profile, if you click the settings link, under emails, if you add your student email address, then you can complete the sign up for GitHub, the GitHub Education Pack. So just click on your account settings and then click the emails link and add your student email here. And then if you finish the page, get the student sign up, it will send an email to your Georgian email. You'll get a message on screen saying it'll take a while to verify you. It doesn't. It verifies you right away. But they'll send an email to your Georgian email with a link, a verification link. You just need to click on that, and that will verify you as a student. So let's go ahead and do that. So it will send an email to your Georgian email. You'll need to log in and click on the verification link. Should be right away. The page will give you a message when you finish the student sign up saying like they'll get back to you in a few days or a few weeks. It doesn't. It's right away.
Oh, I'm still waiting.
Has anybody gotten the verification email? Yeah, so it should come immediately.
Cool, just got it.
If you're not a student, if you don't have the student pack, when you click on a new repository, you can choose private and you won't get that payment prompt. So it will allow you to create private repositories free.
Wait, you don't give the teachers the option then?
I didn't sign up as a, we have an organization account that I use for private. I asked them about that. I said, well, you give it free to the students. I want to teach my students how to use it. So can't I have private? And they said, well, if you create an organization and share it within your department, you can put private repositories in there for free. So I have two kind of accounts. I have my own personal one, but I also have an organization account called Computer Studies.
That just seems so stingy because like,
That's okay. So if I create a repository, but I create it underneath my organization, now I can choose private and it doesn't prompt me to pay, which is fine.
it's in like CAD, if you, or a teacher, you can get CAD.
Yeah. We have one more install to make, and then we're going to take a break. Okay. As I said, there are 3 ways we can access GitHub and create version history for a project we're working on. We can either use the command line tool, which is typically the most common way, where we type a bunch of commands in a DOS screen. We can use Visual Studio, or we can actually, if you refresh your week 13, there's one other free tool. There's a little GitHub program we can install. Some students like this program. I don't use it much. If you go to desktop.github.com, the program looks kind of like this. I have it here. I can show it to you. I can open it up. So we can actually do version control within this little program and then sync our project up to GitHub. So it looks something like this. So here are all of my local projects with version control. And I can actually see my changes right within this program. And I can sync them with GitHub through this program if I want, by just clicking some of the buttons. So this is free. Some of you may like this and want to use it. Some of you may use it and say, I don't like it very much. I'm not going to use it. That's fine. I guess we didn't talk about one other thing I should mention. Just go back here. In terms of GitHub, can you think of any benefit of, I mean, if we install Git on our machine so we can track versions of our program, of our application as we're building it, you know, we can always go back and we can revert to earlier versions if we break something, or we can share our code. But what's the big benefit? Why would we put our code up on GitHub as well?
People could give suggestions.
Could be, yeah. But I mean, if the point of version control is I keep all my versions, so if I lose or break something, I can go and get an earlier version. You know, I could be keeping all, Austin? Right, so backup, what might happen? Why might I need the backup? Right. Even if I've got all my versions, if they're all on this machine and the hard drive fails, doesn't matter that I have the versions. I've lost all 100 versions. What else could happen to this machine? Yeah, someone could say, hey, that's a nice laptop lying around. I think I'll take that. My house could burn down. Right? So if all the versions are on one machine, it doesn't matter that I'm archiving my code. I'm not backing it up somewhere else. So GitHub also provides us with online backup in the cloud. If I lost my computer, because all of my projects are archived on GitHub, I can just get a new computer, log into my install Git on my new computer, log in, and then I can download all my repositories back to my machine. So I haven't lost anything. So we don't want to just keep local copies of our work on our machines. They should be backed up somewhere offline. Well, GitHub is a secure online portal, and I could access it from anywhere, right? Suddenly my machine breaks and I need to work on something. I can say, Ernest, can I jump on your computer and log into my GitHub account so I can take a copy of the code and make some changes to it? Because it's all backed up and stored online on GitHub. So make sure that you download and install, please, the
I've got a question.
one sec, Max. So make sure you download and install this desktop client. It doesn't take long. And then once we log into it with our new GitHub account, it will automatically show us all of our own code repositories. So anything we've put on GitHub, whether it's public or private, we'll have access to those files within our little GitHub client. Question.
So we're able to create private posts now.
Mhm.
It expires. Do all our private posts just become public instantly, or do they remain private after the expiry of our student pack?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. I don't know. That would be a contact us question or something we'd have to research. So we should be mostly set up now. So once we've got our account set up, we've registered and linked it with our student emails, we can create private repositories. Git's installed on our machine, GitHub desktop client. Once we're all set up here, and again, there's versions for Mac or Linux as well, and all of them are free. We've already done this stuff. So we're basically set up to use Git now. So what we're going to do, it's 5 to 9. We're going to take a 10-minute break. When we come back, we'll actually try creating our first repository, and we'll try all 3 of the tools. We'll try using the command line, we'll try using the desktop client, and we'll try using Visual Studio. So we'll see how this all works. Then we'll try looking at how do we actually share code online? How do we work with someone else and publish code all to one repository and merge it together? And I'll show you some of the other neat features of Git. And then the last part of class, I'm going to give you a really small lab where you're going to create a lab 3, but you're going to do it all with GitHub and make some changes to it using GitHub. Okay, so let's take a 10-minute break. We'll come back. Well, it's about 10 after 9. It's almost 9 o'clock.